Welcome to my channel. My name is Brian. Today we're working on this 2008 VW GTI. The emblem would be right there if it still was on it, but it's not. But anyway, it's an 08 Mk5 GTI. Has about 212,000 miles on it. There's a noise I've been chasing in the front end for a while. Sounded like a bad CV joint, and the joint felt like it had a lot of play in it, like it would rattle, but that replacement of that axle didn't fix that noise. So pretty sure it needs strut bearings. I don't know if you can hear it, but you get a clicking sound. Mostly from that side. Anyway, it's pretty annoying and pretty rattly, so maybe when we take it apart, we'll be able to see the real problem or hear it then. But got some new strut bearings, so it should be a fairly easy job. So let's go. I've just jacked up one side at a time, supported with the jack stand. If your car still has the plastic wheel cap covers, you'll need a pick or the factory tool to get those off. And a 17mm something to get the wheel bolts off. This lighting may be kind of washing this out, but there's the sway bar link right here, and it bolts in the back, and that is an 18mm nut, and there should be a hex in the end, because I have a feeling I'm not going to be able to blast that off. And then down here is a pinch bolt that pinches the strut on, and that is an 18mm nut, so that might actually be a triple square. I'm sure you can't even see any of that, but looks like a triple square socket there, so let me get those. So that is a 14mm triple square on the back. Let's get a ratchet in that. Put the old impactor over here. So it feels like that's held in with rust and dirt. There it is. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to get new ones of those. The sway bar link's an 18. It's probably going to spin, but here goes. We'll try it. Which it does. So that feels like a 6mm triple square. We'll put a wrench on there. See if we can turn this, hold it with that. There's probably a special tool for this. We'll try turning anything. Oh, Nelly. That's going to break. Another option, we're probably going to run in the same boat. Another option, you could take it loose here and leave the sway bar link on the strut. Cool. I'll give it a few more blasts with this and see if it'll loosen up some. Yeah, it's having no parts of that. So down here where this link attached, it's an 18mm nut, and it came loose relatively easily. But the link is stuck in the sway bar, so it's going to take little taps. A few taps to get it out of there. remember right, that pinch bolt just pinches the steering knuckle in here, so theoretically this should move down, leaving the strut hanging in the car. I don't believe this side's ever been apart, so this might take a little more coercion. We can try a larger pry bar in here. Let's see if we can kind of push down on it. That's not having any of that. So back here where the split is, see if I can get a chisel in there and get some taps on that, or kind of spread that open a little bit. And that is not looking too promising either. Turn the wheel so there's a little better access. Maybe this will be short enough I can hit it. So this is all sort of coming back to me now. I feel like even if we got that loose, the axle doesn't allow all this to move down far enough to get that out and the strut out from under the fender well. So it feels like axle bolt needs to come out and the 3 lower ball joint bolts need to come out. We can slip that out of the way and drop it down and get it out of the car. I hosed it down with some rust penetrant. I'm not really sure if that makes much difference, but we'll go ahead and get this 10mm bolt out of the way. Give these cords some room, and the brake hose and the ABS sensors and whatever else we have going on. The brake pad wear sensors, I guess, is what those are. This axle bolt's 27. Hopefully it'll break it loose up here off the ground. We would hope that that'll just, yeah, so the axle's loose. So we're good on that. I'll leave that in there for now. Down here, right below at the ball joint, there are 3 bolts, 3 nuts that hold the ball joint in. Those are 15s. And that should allow this knuckle to pry up out of the control arm. Should. All right. So that popped out of there. Turn the wheel back. Should be able to shove the axle out. So we've let it sit a minute, decided to get a little bit medieval, and we'll try this. And there we go. So I guess the key would be to support your knuckle. I wasn't expecting it to come out quite that fast. There she is. So there's this little dimple that I guess holds all that in there once you get in the right position and the bolt in it. But so the strut turns like that. This is making a little bit of noise, but it's original, so I'm not surprised. Up here at the cowl, under this plastic, are the 3 bolts that hold that strut bearing in there. These 3 bolts are 13s. comes your strut. So I have a new strut bearing and the whole rubber mount to go in here. It looks to be correct. Also installed these kind of universal spring compressors I have. We need to go ahead and compress the spring. All right, that should be sufficiently compressed. This nut on top is I believe this was a 21. In this case, this is a 21 millimeter nut. Sometimes you can blast these and they'll spin right off. Let's see what happens. Once you get the nut off, this should all pull off. And there is the strut bearing in a bunch of different pieces. So I'd say it's probably a good time for that. Of course the boot's all ripped, but hey, the strut still is doing strut stuff, so I think it's all right. So that just kind of sits down in that spring pocket. And the mount itself should just seat on it, but we'll go ahead and seat this in here first. All right, it's tight. It's seated on the bearing, bushings there. This will have to go in the car a certain direction, but we'll be able to spin that when we put it in. There's probably a torque spec for these, but tight enough's okay. So it's the next weekend. It's not as sunny, but it's probably just as hot. I went ahead and decided, because I kind of couldn't get this sway bar link off on whatever. I went ahead and ordered new ones. Was able to left this apart, torch this one out, and also remember how rusty that bolt was that pinches the strut in there. I went ahead and pulled this side apart. Took a little more off this time because the bolt that holds that little bracket on fell down inside between the rotor and the brake disc, so I went ahead and took that off. And this bolt is rusty, but is not as not as disintegrated as the other side. So I went ahead and ordered new bolts. These sway bar links, they're relatively cheap. The new pinch bolts, that's why I left everything apart. I also decided, just for see how much easier it would be, I went ahead and ordered the correct tool that goes behind here that is supposed to spread the strut housing apart. You put it in there and basically quarter turn it to open it up. So, I mean, it was like 10 bucks, so we'll give that a shot. Okay, so the brake calipers wired out of the way. That's the condition of the bolt on this side. It's better, but let's replace it. So theoretically this tool goes inside this housing back here somewhere, and you just give it a quarter turn and that'll open up this and make it easier for the strut to come out. I guess it really doesn't matter which direction you go either. So we'll just stick it inside that slot right there. Give it a little turn. See what that does. Doesn't act like a whole lot, but all right, I have the bolts off the ball joint, so this control arm should just slide down. Have the axle bolt loose, so we can pull that out. The ball joint's out. The axle should come out. Okay, now, of course, a little socket tool fell out, so I'm not sure how effective it's really going to be on this side. Maybe because I had this apart once before. So I have that tool in there and spread, still not falling off. And then the more I tap it, it just falls out. So I don't know if there's a specific spot this thing's supposed to be. We'll try putting it in down here. So now for a little update. This tool is pretty much useless in this instance because it's already spread open that width, so it just kind of falls out. No longer able to, there's no way to pound the chisel in very well, so I've removed the tie rod end from this side. Now I need to get the ABS sensor out of here, take the 3 bolts out, and we'll just take the entire strut and knuckle assembly off and try to get it separated out of the car. And so there it is. And I guess my ABS wheel speed sensor got hung up on something. I thought this would stay in, but it kind of fell out in one shot and disconnected that, so we'll have to fix that. So now we have the entire strut and steering knuckle assembly out. Now maybe we can get this damn strut out of here. So as soon as I said that we could now get the strut out of the steering knuckle, I realized the error of my ways. We don't care because we're not replacing the strut, we're only replacing the bearing. So we can leave it all attached. Honestly, it's probably easier doing it this way because you really only have one more bolt to take out. That's for the tie rod end. And the, well, 3 bolts, the brake rotor. You can technically leave the rotor on. The caliper, wheel speed sensor, and the tie rod end, and you got the whole thing. You don't have to mess with spreading this open. So a funny story, the strut, I actually had to replace. So this car had a noise in the front end, kind of very similar to the noise it's making now. And I took it in multiple times. The dealership may or may not rhyme with Flo Volkswagen of Greensboro, but they couldn't find any noise, said I was crazy. Finally, I said, it sounds like it's in the transmission, and they actually put a transmission in this car. About a week later, the sound came back. I took it back. The tech that did the transmission had conveniently left and moved to Arizona or something like that, but another tech diagnosed it as the strut being bad, and sure enough, it was leaking fluid everywhere. But that time, they had run out the warranty, so I ended up putting the strut in here myself when this car was like 100 miles out of warranty. So So maybe I caused this damage with the strut bearing when I did that, but so the strut is newer than the other side. And that strut bearing has completely come apart. So the axle back in, ball joints bolted back on, upper strut mount. So honestly, this is probably the easier way to do it than messing around trying to split that thing. Go put the brake rotor back on. Since I really didn't show taking this apart, there's a T30 bolt that holds the rotor on, if your car still has it. A lot of times those will seize and get drilled out or not get put back on, but the lug bolts hold the thing on, so it's not super critical. So I wired this caliper up out of the way back here so it wasn't stressing the hose. Kind of like that. These caliper bolts bolt in from the back, and they're 21 millimeter. Make sure you go the right direction. Those are likely one-time use bolts, but today they're multi-use bolts. Have the new bolt that holds the strut pinch bolt together. Go ahead and coat it in some anti-seize, at least help it, if not for seizing, at least not rusting. And that was an 18 millimeter, and that is a 14 millimeter triple square. That should be tight enough. So next is the tie rod end. It's back here. It just slips in the hole. And that is an 18 millimeter. Okay. And don't forget your little brake caliper hanging wire. Get that out of there. I did go ahead and purchase new sway bar links. They were, obviously, you saw the problems we had getting them off. That's the part number, or at least the aftermarket part number. Looks like it's a 1KO 411 315R. Hoping they're the same side to side. Looks like these may have hexes in the recess instead of triple squares, which is nice because I did break one on the other side. And I don't believe there's any specific up or down or anything on them. And these are probably not a bad idea to replace. It's because they can be a source of aggravating noise that's hard to find. And as I said, they're like 20 bucks a piece. And I believe those are 18s. So maybe we can get lucky enough and just blast this nut on there. Or not. So the old ones were 18s. These new ones are 19s. Again, tight enough's okay. And the one down here at the sway bar, same deal. If you don't have air tools, you can always use a wrench and an Allen head in the end to hold it stationary, but air tools make it way easier. So ironically, as I was saying, if you don't have air tools or the part doesn't want to cooperate, there is a hex in the end. These particular ones, it's a 5mm hex. Neither one on this side wanted to cooperate and go on with the impact wrench, so you can just hold it and painstakingly turn. You kind of turn the inner, the hex, the stud part, but you can't really swing this wrench very much based on how much room is with this strut. And then right at the end, you can hold it with the hex and tighten it with the wrench. And you want to make sure these are tight, because if that's not tight with that lock nut and this thing's allowed to float around, it'll clunk and click and clack and drive you crazy. You may have recalled that I ended up tearing the plug off the wheel speed sensor when this all came apart. So I was able to find a new pigtail in the jungle place. I'll put a part number in there because this may happen to you someday. So I verified that it's actually the correct plug and it'll snap on. So I'm going to shorten some of this whole setup so we don't have a whole bunch hanging out that could potentially get caught up in the tire. So we'll just cut some of this, strip this back a little bit. Went ahead and got these weatherproof butt connectors. Figured I'd give these a shot. Could also solder and use heat shrink tubing, but I always feel like the heat shrink never quite shrinks like I want it, so we'll give these a shot. If we have problems, we could likely buy this whole harness piece from VW. I'm not really sure if polarity matters, but we have a green and a black and a red and a black, so we're going to go black to black and let the other one be what it is. If we have any ABS problems, we'll know where to start looking. Kind of like it never happened. Before we put the wheels on, we want to pop the center cap out, because once the car's on the ground, we'll need to torque this wheel bolt. right, so we need to torque this bolt that holds the axle. It kind of preloads the wheel bearing. The numbers are all over the place for what size bolt, what type head it is. And then there's a torque spec plus a 90 degrees or plus 180. I'm sure they're one-time use bolts. So I've got this set for 200 foot-pounds. Seems like that's what the old cars were, so I'm going to call that good enough. And while we're here, the lug nuts are 90. So now that wheels are back on, car's on the ground, everything's torqued, we'll take it for a test drive. See if we got rid of that sound in the front, which is good news. I can't hear anything now, so I think that took care of it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.